Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly phenomenal chapter in modern history, how a wildly diverse subcontinent managed to unite and challenge a global empire. I am so thrilled to guide you through this because, honestly, seeing how people forge a collective identity against all odds is just endlessly fascinating. Let's get right into it. So, think about this massive historical shift for a second. India, back then, wasn't a single cohesive entity with one shared culture. Not at all. It was this vast, complex landscape of different languages, religions, and social groups. So how on earth did they transform from a totally fractured population into a united, unstoppable front against British colonial rule? What actually brought them all together? Well, we've got 5 key areas on the agenda today to answer that. We'll look at the impact of World War I, the core idea of satyagraha, the massive non-cooperation and civil disobedience movements, and finally, how a brand new national identity was forged. Starting off with Section 1, the impact of World War I. Now, you usually think of World War I as a European conflict, right? But the shockwaves fundamentally altered life across the Indian subcontinent. It created a totally new and frankly devastating economic reality. To pay for the war, the colonial government hiked up customs duties and brought in income taxes. Prices literally doubled between 1913 and 1918. In the rural areas, people were furious over forced recruitment into the army. And on top of the financial strain, widespread crop failures created massive acute food shortages. It was a perfect storm of hardship. And the human cost of these compounding disasters? Absolutely staggering. The 1921 census recorded that 12 to 13 million people perished. I mean, let that number really sink in. Millions died as a direct result of famines and an influenza epidemic. People were desperately hoping things would get better after the war, but that relief, it never came. It just left behind a powder keg of resentment, waiting for a spark. Which brings us to Section 2, the power of satyagraha. Out of all this immense suffering, Mahatma Gandhi returns to India from South Africa in early 1915, and he brings with him a radically different mode of struggle called satyagraha. It's this profound concept that relies entirely on the power of truth. The whole idea is if your cause is true and you're fighting injustice, you do not need physical force. Instead of going for vengeance, a satyagrahi wins the battle by appealing directly to the oppressor's conscience. You're persuading them to actually see the truth, rather than just beating them into submission. He totally reframed how we think about passive resistance. Gandhi famously said, "Satyagraha is pure soul force." What's so brilliant here is how he frames nonviolence. He's saying, hey, this isn't a weapon of the weak, it's an intense, active force of the strong. He believed this supreme dharma of nonviolence was exactly the thing that could unite all Indians, regardless of their background, because, let's face it, they were never going to beat the British Empire in a pure shootout. And this soul force was very deliberately juxtaposed against the physical, everyday brutality of the colonial regime. The government's go-to move was responding to peaceful crowds with martial law and brutal repression. The most tragic example, of course, being the Jallianwala Bagh incident in 1919, where they fired on a peaceful gathering. It just revealed this incredibly stark contrast between Gandhi's methods and the sheer violence of the colonial state. All right, moving to Section 3. The non-cooperation movement. So, realizing that isolated, scattered protests just weren't enough to shake a global empire, the leaders knew they had to escalate into a much broader, highly organized front. Gandhi lays out this calculated step-by-step master plan. Step 1, everyone surrenders their government-awarded titles. Step 2, a massive, sweeping boycott of the civil services, the army, police, courts, schools, and, crucially, foreign goods. And finally, Step 3, if the government responds with repression, they launch a full-blown civil disobedience campaign. The response was unlike anything seen before. People from literally all walks of life poured into the streets, and through these shared massive processions and strikes, totally diverse groups of people, peasants, factory workers, students, they started discovering a shared unity. Their shared oppression under the British became the very glue that tied them all together. And man, did this hit the British where it hurts, right in the wallet. Foreign cloth was heavily boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, and imported clothes were thrown into these massive bonfires. Just look at the numbers. The value of foreign cloth imports basically halved in a single year, plummeting from 102 crore rupees down to 57 crore. Merchants across the country just flat out refused to trade in or finance foreign goods anymore. But here's the reality check when you're dealing with mass movements. Maintaining absolute, strict nonviolence across millions of deeply frustrated people is incredibly tough. In 1922, at a place called ch2, a peaceful demonstration escalated into a violent clash with the police. Staying absolutely true to his principles, Gandhi abruptly pulled the plug on the entire non-cooperation movement. He basically said, nope, the people need to be properly trained in nonviolent mass struggle before they're actually ready for this.
Which brings us nicely to Section 4, the civil disobedience movement.
By the late 1920s, with the global economic depression making things even worse, the political landscape shifts again into an even more defiant phase. Now, you really need to distinguish between these two movements because it highlights a massive escalation in strategy. While non-cooperation was mostly about just refusing to engage, boycotting schools and goods, civil disobedience asked people to take a much bolder step. Now, they were being asked to actively yet peacefully break colonial laws that they found unjust.
And the absolute masterstroke of this strategy? The famous salt march. Why salt of all things? Well, because everyone used it. Rich or poor, it didn't matter. And the British held a strict monopoly over making it, plus they taxed it heavily. So Gandhi, with 78 volunteers, starts walking. They cover 240 miles over 24 days, and thousands join along the way. When he finally reaches Dandi in April 1930, he ceremonially boils seawater to make his own salt. He directly defies British law, officially kicking off the civil disobedience movement.
And finally, Section 5, forging a national identity.
Because you see, political strategies and boycotts on the streets, that was only half the battle. A remarkably powerful cultural shift was happening in the minds of the people. A collective sense of belonging doesn't just spontaneously happen. It has to be carefully nurtured. So nationalists started reviving traditional folklore and songs, believing it held the true, uncorrupted essence of their culture. They designed unifying tricolor flags. And crucially, they started reinterpreting Indian history, pushing back against the British narrative of Indians being backward, and instead instilling massive pride in India's ancient advancements in art, science, and trade.
Visuals became super important for bridging deep religious divides. Take this popular print of nationalist leader Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Notice how he is deliberately framed by the sacred institutions of different faiths. There's a temple, a church, a mosque. This was all about promoting a cohesive, shared national identity that could stand united against the common colonizer. The very identity of the nation itself was eventually personified into an image Bharat Mata, or Mother India. By creating this visual representation early in the 20th century, artists gave this incredibly diverse population a tangible, shared mother figure to unite behind. Devotion to her became this deeply emotional symbol, an absolute proof of your dedication to the nationalist cause. By rallying around these unified symbols, the very nature of protest transformed. Take the Swaraj flag, designed by Gandhi in 1921. It's a tricolor of red, green, and white, featuring a spinning wheel right in the center to represent that core Gandhian ideal of self-reliance. Holding this flag aloft wasn't just about protesting a specific law anymore. It turned a simple march into a powerful visual declaration of an entire nation's defiance. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We've talked about the massive economic boycotts, the incredible marches, and the absolute brilliance of Satyagraha. But we've also seen the undeniable power of shared symbols, folklore, and a reinvented history. So I ask you, did India become a free nation simply because of its physical resistance on the streets? Or did it ultimately win its freedom because it finally, truly imagined itself as one united people? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the history around you.